A notable Blue Jays insider has spoken out about one of the potential targets that they could have this offseason, and it's a guy that played pretty deep into the playoffs who could definitely help out the power deficiency in this lineup. So we'll break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as a current player that is in-house right now. He's behind schedule after a surgery that didn't really go as planned. So we'll have that and much more coming up next. Welcome in, everybody, to Jays Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, the offseason fun truly begins now. The Blue Jays are going to be in on everybody. They're going to be targeting everybody, but we don't know if that's actually true. We're just hearing about it, and we're reporting back to you guys what we are hearing on a daily basis. But this one target is pretty interesting to me, Nick, and I think I never really thought of it, honestly, but if the money's right, and if he sees himself in Toronto long term, and if he can produce the way that he's produced in years past, this could be a match made in heaven for the Blue Jays and this player.
Yeah, there's a lot of reports going around, and like you mentioned, this guy we haven't brought up before, but let's just dive into it. It's a report that dropped from Ben Nicholson-Smith, and you can see the name here, and it said, what position are they most likely to upgrade offensively? Of course, they're at the GM meetings right now, so we're starting to get some insight into what Ross Atkins' plan is going to be. We'll have another video covering that soon, but corner outfield is Atkins' most prominent plan, but they're also looking at infielders. Speaking of which, how serious are they about Gleyber Torres, the longtime Yankee, in whom they're now expressing interest, according to a source? So, Peter, they are expressing interest in Yankees second baseman Gleyber Torres, according to Ben Nicholson-Smith. You see it's here from Claps. Tio, Gleyber, Kikuchi would be an interesting free agency, and we can dive into that in a little bit here. But looking at Gleyber Torres, and we have another update as well about who other people are there that could be targeting some other players. But Gleyber Torres is super interesting. As you look at some of their stats now, put up a 1.8 WAR last season, 2.9 the year before, 4 in 2022. He's a power hitting second baseman, hitting 20 home runs in back-to-back years prior to last season. Obviously, the Yankees made it to the World Series and lost there. What are your thoughts on a Gleyber Torres of the Toronto Blue Jays signing here? It could make some sense. Granted, it was his worst year of his career aside from 2021. Last year for Gleyber, only putting up a 101 OPS plus. But it would definitely inject some power into the second base position that at this point is a complete unknown. I mean, you can throw some guys in there, Davis Schneider, some Will Wagner is probably the leader right now, who's still super young. But if they want to put some more chips into the win now basket, Gleyber Torres is probably the guy, and he's only 27 years old. The question is what kind of contract he's going to get.
Yeah, well, there are some red flags with Gleyber Torres. So, firstly, the defense is not very good, which is something that we got to address right away.
Yeah.
And another red flag was that he refused to change positions when the Yankees acquired Jazz Chisholm. So maybe there's some attitude problems there. Maybe there's some lack of wanting to do what's best for the team. But ultimately, him staying at second base was best for the team because Jazz looked good at third base. And in the playoffs, he was great. He was one of their more productive hitters. His OPS was over 800 throughout the entire postseason run. And he was outperforming the likes of Aaron Judge. He was outperforming the likes of Anthony Rizzo. And at the top of that lineup, he was a big reason why the Yankees were playing so deep into October. So I get that there are red flags. Maybe the defense isn't where you want it to be, but the guy can hit, man. And yeah, he had a down year, but he really showed up when it mattered most, and his playoff numbers reflect that. So, like I mentioned earlier in the intro, if the years are right and if he wants to be here long term, then I think it makes sense. The Blue Jays need power. And this guy has power. He's hit 38 home runs in a season before, and he plays a non-power position like second base. So having this guy, adding him into your lineup, probably hitting him at the top of your lineup, I think that makes you a much better ball club because then that takes George Springer out of that leadoff role and gives you a little bit more thump at the top of that lineup and probably makes you a lot deeper as well because Springer can hit in the 6 or 7 hole.
Yeah, and again, as you can see here, their priority is corner outfield and a power hitting corner outfield at that. However, if they need ultimately for the Jays to win more games, they need to have, like you mentioned, some more power in the lineup. If they had a second baseman that can put up 20 home runs in any given season, then you're automatically kind of putting yourself in a much better position going forward, whether you get some of the big fish or not, whether that's, Juan Soto, we've heard some things on Pete Alonso, all these different players. adding a second baseman, whether or not you have a ton of faith in Gleyber Torres and the amount of money he's getting is still up in the air. It'll probably be a multi-year deal, like you mentioned, but it's an intriguing thing and something that hasn't really been brought up much. So let us know in the comments your thoughts on that. Would you want a Gleyber Torres type player on the Jays? Get some power and some. Really, it's just some some locked down assurance at second base if you get a guy like Gleyber Torres,
Yeah.
something the Jays haven't had in a very long time at second base, albeit you do have Will Wagner. But another piece of this I just want to get your quick thoughts on, Peter, before we move on from Ben Nicholson-Smith, because there's a lot of things coming out now. He said this is now the second time that Yusei Kikuchi has been linked to the Toronto Blue Jays. I covered it in the video yesterday, and Ross Atkins said he's a very good player who fit the culture well in our environment, and they also linked Sagano, who could be on the Jays' radar too. So those are a couple other starting pitchers. They're obviously targeting every single position. Starting pitching, corner outfield is the priority. But this is the second time now they've linked Yusei Kikuchi in a week to the Toronto Blue Jays. Ben Nicholson-Smith and Chadavidi, that is. So do you have any thoughts on that before we move on to the injury update? It's I wouldn't be surprised. I said it in yesterday's video. If they re-sign Yusei Kikuchi, it'd be something I wouldn't be opposed to, and I definitely wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Look, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I just don't think that it's a number one priority right now. And I understand all the injuries that you're dealing with in the starting rotation. Your prospect pool is razor thin right now, so I get that you'd want to bring in a veteran starter, but you know, Kikuchi was good towards the end of his tenure with the Blue Jays, but he showed a lot of inconsistencies, and I know he kind of turned that around with the Astros, and he was a big reason why they were able to shore up their rotation heading into the playoffs. He had some ridiculous numbers with them, but I just I can't see it happening. I can't see them bringing him back. And I've seen some stuff about Danny Jansen as well. Like I understand the nostalgia part of it and wanting these guys back because they were on some pretty good regular season teams with the Blue Jays, but I just think it's time to move in a different direction and not really revert back to Yusei Kikuchi because he is on the wrong side of 30. And you have a lot of guys in your rotation right now that are nearing that same age mark, like Gosman nearing the mid 30s mark. You have Chris Bassett, who is in his mid 30s. And then José Berríos, obviously, he's 27, 28 years old, but he's signed for the long term as well. So you have aging guys in your rotation. And I want to give the young guys a chance, whoever, whichever of them are actually healthy heading into next season. So I love Yusei. He had great times here in Toronto, but I just think it's time that we move past this. And would I be shocked? I would be kind of surprised if the Blue Jays brought him back. And if you were to ask me if I wanted it, I would. My short answer would be no.
Yeah, I think for me it depends on what happens with this team. I mean, if they go out and they get some of the bigger fish in free agency, which I don't know how likely that is at this point. If that's like a Juan Soto, then maybe you go and try to win over the next few years with Yusei Kikuchi. But otherwise, depending on how they handle this offseason, yeah, I don't even really. I wouldn't be opposed to Yusei, but I wouldn't prioritize getting him back, even though I think that it's something that Ross Atkins is considering strongly because of how many times he's been linked. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. One other thing before we wrap up about the actual current team. So Bichette, Dalton Varsho, and Will Wagner recovering well from their respective surgeries. However, he did come out and say right after that I think the expectation is he could be a little bit behind his recovery from the shoulder surgery. Points to internal depth options, said the Jays will consider adding. So again, this would kind of align with them wanting a corner outfielder. Granted, Dalton Varsho at this point is the center fielder for the future of this team, but they have some guys who can play center field, even if you put Springer out there, even though he's aging at 35. But what are your thoughts on this? Obviously, things went well, I guess technically surgery-wise, but I don't love the fact that he's behind because he's been out for a very long time, and I want to see a full healthy Dalton Varsho on opening night. But that being said, you do want him to be 100% healthy rather than rushing him back. So he is our cornerstone of our team for the future. So it's a bit of good, bit of bad.
Yeah, did they not wait until the season was over for him to get his surgery? Like I remember that they delayed this thing, and yeah, maybe that's why he's behind schedule right now. I remember Dalton Varsho missed the last portion of games. He was placed on the IL, and then the surgery date was a month later or 2 months later, something like that. So, I mean, why was that not done right away? You knew that this was a possibility if you delayed the surgery. And unfortunately, it's looking like Dalton Varsho is, even if he does play on opening day. The fact that he'll probably not be there during spring training and during all the practices and the batting practice and all that, and have to ease himself back in, he's probably going to struggle offensively, and fans are probably going to be pissed off with him in the first 2 months of the season because it is hard for players to miss spring training and then hit the ground running right when the season starts. We saw it this year with a lot of guys who signed late in the year, like Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, Matt Chapman, who started off hot, but he only played a handful of spring training games. So these guys need reps. And even though they're baseball players, they do it for a living. They need to be able to be in there to start off the season the way that they want to. So the fact that he's injured and that he's delayed right now, I think that's gonna gonna set him up for failure in the first portion of the season. And fans just don't be surprised when it happens because it's probably gonna happen.
Yeah, hopefully he'll be ready. But we saw what happened a couple years ago with Alejandro Kirk when he missed spring training. He had a really bad start. And also, of course, Eric Swanson. So it's very important to have these hot starts, or at least getting your reps in spring training. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments your thoughts are on all this news. There's going to be a lot more coming, so make sure you hit the subscribe button. We'll see you guys later.